brand ambassadors, which is amazing. It's great to see so many people here. I actually thought I'd get parking. I wasn't able to find parking for half an hour. At least I'm not late. So I am joined on stage by Conor Buckley from Human Collective. We are Human Collective. Then we have Matthew Dowling, the chair of Irish EV Association, and we have Brian Dowling, Dublin, from the Dublin EV Owners Club. Okay, so we're going to have a quick chat just about our first impressions about switching to EVs. We all did that recently enough. So I'll start with you, Conor. You run a successful business, you have an EV. What's your journey been like?
To be honest, Cassie, thanks for having me. I was nervous at the start because we do a lot of corporate clothing, we do a lot of deliveries. We go down to Cork to Marina Market, and I was nervous, but I was really, really happy with it. In the car that I have a Volvo C40 Recharge. When you type in your destination, it tells you what your battery will be like when you get there, and it also tells you what it's like when you get back. So completely helps with the range anxiety. You know, when I went down to Marina Market in Cork, it told me this is where you stop, this is what your battery will be like when you stop, and then when you refill, this is what your battery will be like when you get to your final destination. So incredible smartness from the car. So it's been an amazing experience. You know, you feel like you're kind of floating on grass in the C40 Recharge. You know, you feel like, I'm not actually driving here, this is like just gliding. Even with the traffic, as bad as it was today, and I can't handle traffic, I was like, it's okay, I'm happy enough.
Yeah, it is a nice experience. I've driven two of them, the Cooper Born and the MG4, and they are just lovely inside. It's like floating. Matthew, now you are driving an EV and you have 4 kids?
I have 4 children.
4 children, okay, so tell me about your journey.
So I suppose I started in an Nissan Leaf, which is kind of the traditional approach where a lot of people end up in an EV. Had 3 kids, wasn't expecting another one with a Leaf, and then had another child on the way, so you know we had to reevaluate what we were doing there. So I bought a Citroën E-Space Tourer, which is a 9-seater van, fully electric, and unlike the Volvo C40 and being able to glide around the place and do stuff, it is the most basic vehicle you're ever going to come across, insofar as I have a little bar that tells me my battery percentage, but after that, no tech, no nothing. It's as simple as it comes. And with children, that's perfect because they ruin everything when it comes to a car. So it's not worth having expensive vehicles when it's just muck, dirt, whatever else you want to put into a car as a child. So yeah,
so that's fun. Perfect with kids. Amazing.
Yes, it's perfect.
Brian, your experience is like mine. I don't have a charger at home. So tell me about your journey with an electric car.
Thanks for having me. So my journey started back in about 2018. I went back and forth looking at moving to an electric vehicle. At the time, you know, there wasn't very many around. I was renting at the time. I couldn't put a charger in. But I looked at the driving that I was doing, which was mostly within the Dublin area, and it worked out for me that it made sense for me to change to an electric vehicle. At the time, I bought a used electric vehicle, so it was quite cheap for me to change from my current car to the new one, and that kind of made sense then from a cost perspective. Charging at the time was free, which was a benefit for a couple of years that we enjoyed. That has changed, but you know, in that change, it has made the availability of the chargers a lot better now. So I was able to basically work around, you know, the trips that I would normally take around the city. And one thing that I went by, which was repeated frequently at the time, was to always be charging the ABC when you're renting or when you don't have your own charger. You need to always consider where you're going to charge next, but around your own lifestyle. So I wasn't, you know, going out of my way. It was fitting in nicely with how I was able to drive. Since then, last year I moved to Tesla Model 3. I had a house and a home charger, so I got to see both sides of it, with the low range used EV and then with the longer range one now, which, you know, it isn't really something you think about when you have the current EVs.
Yeah, see, I don't have a charger. I live in Kildare. And I've had to get used to going and charging, so I use chargers around the place very often. But it's completely fine. It's just about planning, and anyone that knows me knows I'm the worst planner in the whole world. So I had to just get used to planning my journeys, planning my trip, getting there an hour before. You know, honestly, if I was supposed to come to Dublin, I would probably get ready 2 hours to leave the house 2 hours before so I could go charge. So when people ask about charging, if you don't have a charger at home, it's very doable. You just need to plan, which is not something I'm good at. So we'll move on now to first impression. First impression, Conor, when you got an EV, what was the first impression?
For me, it was the smoothness in the drive, like the quietness. I felt like I wasn't really driving. I honestly felt like I was floating. I had a really chunky car previously, so it was heaven, to be honest with you. I even now, like, I just love that. I love the car so much. It's just so smooth and soft, and I think it'd be really difficult to go back now. Like, I don't know if there's any way you're going back. And I think what people probably need to do is just go for a test drive, maybe an extended test drive, because once you do that, I do have a charging unit in the house, and what's great about that, Cassie, is that, like, I never have to stop for fuel, which, you know, and especially, I have a young family as well. I have 3 kids, and if you have the 3 kids in the car, you don't have to stop for fuel, and they might kick off. So to be able to just charge overnight, I have a friend of mine who, you know, Cassie, I won't say his name, and he said to me, oh, I would just forget to charge and I'd run out of battery. I said, do you ever forget to put fuel in your car? He's like, no. Well, then you wouldn't forget to charge it, you know? And if you are the type of person who forgets to charge, you're probably the type of person who forgets to put fuel in your car, you know?
Yeah, I would have done that. I definitely was one of those people. But listen, like I said, I've got used to planning. My car is...
You know what's interesting about planning? I remember going down to Cork when I was a little boy with my dad, and he'd have the road maps out, and he'd be planning the night before for the turn-offs and everything, or wherever we went in Ireland. So back in the day, we planned. Now we've got a bit lazy with Google Maps, but actually, that's what everyone did. They needed to understand the signposts with no Google Maps. So planning is something that, like, has been done previously. We've just been spoiled.
The planning is actually very important in every aspect of your life. I just had to get used to it in the car aspect. People also ask what you do when you're charging the car, because I do travel around Ireland a lot, so I'm probably different places in Ireland twice a week. And I actually, it's, you know, 40 minutes passes pretty quickly. I'm usually just there for 40, 45 minutes. Passes really quickly. Do some work in the car or go in, get a tea, something like that. So it's actually, just wanted to tell you guys that for absolutely no reason. But some people ask me, what do I do when my car is charging? That's what I do. Matthew, tell me what your first impression of getting an EV was.
First impression, similar, how smooth it is, how easy it is to use in many ways. The biggest thing that stood out for me is I would be the traditional petrol head. So fast cars, fast motorbikes, that works. So as you look at an EV, the thing that really brought me to them was the fact that when you were driving one, it actually did what you wanted to do when you wanted to do it. And it's funny, you go back to petrol and diesel cars afterwards, and you wanted to accelerate at this point in time, and all of a sudden you realise there's a delay, there's a disconnect. And you're talking about a performance car in petrol or diesel that doesn't drive as sharp as any EV from the get-go. They don't have the performance in a standard Leaf, but you know, you miss out on that connectivity that's there. So that's the first thing that stood out for me. The next thing was just ease of use insofar as, you know, your Nissan Leaf, when you plugged it in overnight, you set your charge timer, you set your heating timer, it knew when you wanted to leave in the morning, and then all of a sudden I wasn't coming out in the middle of winter to defrost my car. I would just look out the window, car windscreen was clear, heated seats were on, heated steering wheel was on, and I just walked out the door, plugged it out at 100% because it had done all of the work on the charge point. I left with 100%, could do all my driving, and that simplicity, that niceness is something that doesn't exist anywhere else other than an EV. So that to me stood out completely.
Yeah, I completely agree with that on the frosty mornings. It's incredible. Even if you're staying somewhere else and you haven't charged your car or anything like that, and the car is frosty and you get out, or you don't use the app, which Derek always reminds me to keep using the app. Sometimes I forget to use it to heat the car, but you go out and it honestly takes less than a minute to warm the whole
It's
car
very
up in
quick.
like 30
Yeah.
seconds less.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
It's
and
amazing.
Because it's electric, that instant heat is there. It's amazing that you just, it's done. You're not waiting for a diesel car to warm up in the morning where it's 5-10 minutes before it starts to heat up, then it starts to defrost further. It's instantaneous even without that, charge point up and going. Yeah.
Brian, what about your experience, your first impression? I know you said you switched in 2018, so what was your first impression back then?
Yeah, so my first impression back then was the lack of noise really was a big one, especially on longer trips. I'm used to smaller cars, the engine is absolutely roaring, and all you're hearing is this motor kind of in front of you winding away, and it gets on your head after a while. Like, you think you're not going to sit on your couch at home with a generator outside your window, but you'll drive down the motorway for a couple of hours with this motor screaming in front of you. And with the electric car, there is some noises, but there's a lot less. What I found is that I was less tired while driving on trips, and that's not even considering that I did have to stop more often to charge. But I just found that with the reduced noise, you have I noticed for myself less fatigue on driving, and that's something that I think we all need to consider when driving. Just a safety aspect. So that's for me. And then also the performance. It wasn't a performance car that I bought. I didn't have that budget at the time. It was a Renault Zoe, a small, hatchback, but it was well able to keep up with the traffic on the motorway, emerging. And I've driven since then. Occasionally, I've driven petrol and diesel cars as rentals, and I realised immediately that performance that I'm used to there, even in the cheapest electric cars, isn't there unless you spend a considerable amount of money on a petrol or diesel car. And so that's kind of, it's a nice added benefit. I think a lot of people don't understand. They assume that electric cars are slow.
They are definitely not slow. I've driven two, and as soon as you put the pedal to the metal, as I'm saying, I think my dad says that, it flies, doesn't it? No matter, like you said, whatever type of car you get. I found that as well. Again, I've only driven two, but that was my experience. Now, Conor, you mentioned range anxiety, and I'm sure so many people have heard about range anxiety. It was something that actually Derek said to me. He was like, "No, if you get range anxiety, just text me." And I was like, "What is that?" So I found out what that was. My first journey in an electric car was down to West Cork. So the day after I got the Cooper born, I was driving to West Cork, and you do have to charge in between that. So I kind of was put in at the deep end, and then I think it was the best way to do it, because then after that, everything was really simple. It was easy, charged in Cork, and then went down, and actually in Skibbereen, I think there was a fast charger. It was very handy. It was actually a very doable journey. What are your thoughts on range anxiety, Conor? Did you ever get it?
I am a nervous driver. I would get range anxiety if I was going down the road with 3 kids in the back. I'd get some type of anxiety. But going to Marina Market, for me, I was nervous. So I typed it into my smart car, and as I said, it told me where to stop, how long it was going to take, and then when I get down, I was going into the Marina Market, so it was going to tell me how much battery I had then I could charge beside the train station. There's an ESP plug point there, so it was so easy, like it was so seamless, and I was genuinely surprised by it. Now, I'm definitely fortunate that the C40 Recharge has all the electronics to tell me what to do. So in the space of 1 minute, typing in the journey, I was like, this is perfect. The only thing I would say is if on the way home, a friend of mine said, "Come by me for tea in Tipperary." And I said, I can't, because I was trying to remap it and all that type of thing. And he actually said, "Look, I've got a charger, it's slow, but it's fine." But a bit like you, Cassie, by the time you have your cup of tea and your lunch, it's charged.
You're good to go. What about you, Matthew? Did you experience any range anxiety other than from the kids?
Outside of the kids, yes, initially with the first gen Leaf when I had it, because that was a small battery. The charging network was not anywhere near as good as it is now. We will have people complain that the charging network isn't as good as it could be, which, there's a lot of work being done, and as Debbie was on before, so what's coming is phenomenal. When we talk to charge point operators, what is coming is huge in the next 12 to 18 months. It's it will be a massive shift in that time period. But from that perspective, yes, originally, I had back in the day where, you know, from Limerick to West Cork, I was stopping in Fermoy because that was the only one I could get to. I couldn't get to Cork City to keep going to West Cork at the time. So I had to learn that. But since then, it's a very different landscape. So, like, we had a meet-up last year in Castleballingham. I did Limerick to Castleballingham and back down in a day in my Citroen van, which does, because of the size of it, because of the weight, it does about 130 kilometers to a charge as what it is. It's a big enough battery, it uses it very fast. But up and down the day, 500 kilometer days without issue, not a problem in Ireland as it is at this point in time. And as I say, things are progressing to such an extent that it's really going to go further and beyond what it is now. So it's getting to that point where you're passing a charge point and you go, will I charge here, will I get to the next one? But it's going to become the point where very soon you go, no, it's okay, I'll keep going, I'll go to the next one, because you know there is the next one to come and it is going to be there. So yeah, very different then to now, much easier now. It is getting much easier with the charge points that are coming as well at that point.
Thanks, Matthew. And Brian, I can imagine from 2018 the difference is just huge. What was range anxiety like then?
I mean, initially I was terrified. I actually put off buying a car for 6 months because I was reading all the stories and people talking. But you have to understand is that people are sharing this information. They tend to share the more negative aspects first. They don't share the positive experiences. You know, I had a lot of them, and afterwards I looked, as I said, at what my driving was, and you yourself will understand what your driving experience is and where you normally go. And then really the range anxiety, I did have it initially, but once I understood what the car could do, and I knew how to charge, and I did that locally, so I got confidence in kind of what the car could do, then I could take longer trips, and I went all over Ireland, and this was not a long range car. I did the Ring of Kerry, I went into Achill, you know, places where people would balk at doing that. And that was a 130 kilometer range car. But because I knew what the car could do, I trusted and I had reliance on that. So the anxiety went away, and then ultimately it came back to charging anxiety. Where am I going to charge? And that's improved, as Matthew said, in the last couple of years. It's completely different.
Could I ask a question? Do you ever use one pedal drive? Which is the one pedal drive is when you basically, if you drop your foot off the accelerator, the car will really drop its pace. And it's a great way to save your battery as well. So there's a setting on some cars where you can go to one pedal drive. So currently now, you might find yourself braking a lot because the car just moves so quickly. But if you use one pedal drive, as soon as you take your foot off the accelerator, it just literally, it stops. You ever use that function? Or?
Yeah, I did. I relied on it heavily with the older car because you try to eke out as much range as possible. And it was set up a little bit differently. You know, it was an older car. It was more like a petrol automatic in terms of feel versus, say, the Model 3, which is, it literally stops, just as you take your foot off. So it's a very different experience. But then you would drive that kind of more like you would with a petrol car, and that you're barely filling it because it'll do petrol car range. So being able to have the practice with the older car, that again, I was very well used to driving and getting as much possible out of it.
And like you said, it's just a matter of getting used to it, like anything really. I mean, I've gone down to, I think I've gone down to about 5% before, and I haven't had any anxiety or anything like that. I don't know what happens when you get to 0%. I just will text Derek. I have no idea what happens, but it never happens.
To no percent. Like no range, just flashing lines.
Oh, and then what happens?
The car kept going. I mean, some of them have a hidden range after it gets to 0, but again, if you understand what it can do, but I did the same on my petrol cars before. You just kind of get a bit cheeky in terms of trying to,
Yeah. Well, I won't even attempt it. I did 5%, that was about it. I promise. But yeah, so I'm sorry, we'll move on to then, do you think EVs suit everyone? Well, I guess we have such a range of people here. For me, if you are not a planner and can be a little bit disorganized sometimes, it will suit you. And I've had a few people be like, but I'm really disorganized. 100% it'll work, you just need to plan. If you're traveling all around Ireland, you just get very used to it. And my advice would be go to West Cork on your first journey, and then you're completely fine, because then I've spoken to people who live in Dublin and you just charge every single night. So if you have a charger in your house, you live in Dublin, I don't know why you wouldn't have an electric car. The challenge is just maybe when you're driving a little bit further, but I haven't found that challenging at all, and I'm very new to it. So that's my opinion. Conor, do you think electric cars are for everyone?
I have had friends who said, oh, I couldn't drive that, but they are, again, the same type of people who probably drive, forget to put petrol in their car, they're probably, and the idea of downloading apps is a massive issue for them, so they're probably those type of people in general. Honestly, if I can do it, honestly, because I'm not the type of person who likes to have, anyone can have an electric car. And then the other thing is, what I found is, so Cassie, as you mentioned, I have a sustainable clothing business. I think if you're thinking about the planet, and you're doing those little small steps to make bigger impacts, then going the electric way is a great way to do it. You genuinely feel a little bit better about yourself, and actually you're more likely to do more sustainable acts, kind of behaviours, because you're already on that road. So I definitely think anyone can do it. Maybe not in 2018. I think that would have been a challenge, but I think these days and the pathway forward, absolutely.
Matthew, what do you think? Suit everyone?
So you would expect from the Irish EV Association, I would say yes, 100%. But there are use cases where the answer is no, still. You take, and I'm going to give an example of people who have been in contact with us, where if you are in the situation where you have an EV that doesn't have that big range, you have somebody that has medical conditions at home that might need to get to a medical facility in an emergency. If you don't have the ability to do that in the EV that you have or can afford, like my advice actually at that point is actually don't do it. You're not that person that this is designed for at this point in time. It's not right for that individual to go down that route. So there are use cases where definitely I would advise people not to do it, because they are in a situation where it just doesn't make sense when you look at the big picture that's behind it. But however, for the majority of people that don't have those sort of nuanced situations, yes, definitely. If you have a charge point at home, it's almost a slam dunk, because you can charge at home, cars full every day, and you can get going again. If you're in a situation where you don't have a charge point, as we say, the network is getting better, we're going to end up in a situation where a lot more public chargers are going to be there to allow people to charge that don't have a charger at home. So it is getting there. It is much better. I would say, like Brian has talked about here, a perfect example of living without a charge point for a long period of time in yourself. It is doable. It's a slightly different way of doing things than you might have done it before. But it's almost a shift to say, I'm not going to a petrol station to fill up my car anymore, I'm going to a charge point to fill up my car. That's the frame of mind you put into it. So once a week on a Sunday, I used to fill up my car for the week as it was, and now I'm going to a charge point, not a petrol station. That's the way to look at it.
Brian, what do you think? Does it suit everyone in EV?
I would say yes, but the right tool for the job, right? You need to, and the reason why I look back to when I got the EV, I got one that, I was looking at the Nissan Leaf, nice car. I went for the Renault Zoe ultimately because of that fast AC charging, which were plentiful in the area, so I could charge faster. I plugged it in the evening, when it was quiet, and then it would charge. So I bought the right tool for the job that had the range that would do me for 90% of my driving. What I would say now is that there's a lot more EVs available, as you can all see here, even like used ones. But if you're someone that drives a lot, don't go buying a 5 or 10-year-old EV, right? Maybe as a second car, it's a good way to dip your toe in. But buy an EV that has the range that would fit your driving needs, and the charging that would fit your driving needs as well. Especially if you're not having a home charger, you need to buy one that has a faster, like 11 kilowatt charger at least, and faster DC charging. That's just the consideration, I think.
I was going to say, do you know how much in a week you would averagely drive from, because you're saying business perspective, you're on the road a lot. What are you looking at from a weekly driving?
It's a good question. If I'm honest, I don't know. I charge it every night at home, so I never let it go below 30%. And I did have a worry when it was really cold. Someone texted me to say, "Oh my God, your battery's going to die because it's really cold." And I was,
Someone said that to me too, and I was like, what? So
it was fine.
I have no battery anxiety, but
I don't know what temperature they were expecting it to be, but it was fine. The battery didn't change.
Okay.
So I don't like driving in town full stop, but when you're driving in that car, again, it doesn't feel clunky and the big noise in the background.
This is the big thing, is driving in the city in an EV. Okay, yeah, we should have a massive amount of cars in the city, but if you have to drive in the city, it's so much safer because you can go, you can crawl, you can go walking, or at the speed of the cyclist in front of you. You're not stressing out because you're changing up and down between first and second gear. Even if you're in an automatic, it's still struggling. An EV, you have a lot more control at lower speed.
Well, I suppose I ask the question because going back to how many people are driving, what are you doing? Like Monday to Friday is 500 kilometers in my weekly driving. And then on top of that, I'm going to do between 300 and 500 kilometers on the weekend. So I'm between 2,500 to 3,000 kilometers per month every month of the year. So when we talk about how much driving, and that's why I was curious from your perspective, is, you know, I can do an awful lot of driving and a lot more than probably the average. It's probably double the average as it is. And I go back to the point that, you know, I've never been stuck. I've never been really at a big queue at a charge point. I've never been in a situation where I haven't been able to go where I need to go. So it's kind of a bit curious to see from your side, from what you were doing as well, as to, you know, is it a problem, you know?
The only anxiety I ever had was I went to a stag in the country, and there was the charging units I thought were all broken. And I thought, oh no, I'm stuck. But there wasn't, there was one left, you know, and there was a bit of a queue. But again, it was fine. It gave me an excuse to have a lie-in the next day.
Yeah, and I do find if there's ever an issue with any charger, if you call the number there, it's always fixed. It's very easy. And also I do find because I've run into people who are new to charging stations, and there's always someone there to help. To be honest, like everyone is really friendly and everyone's like, oh, do you need a hand? So that can be a
That's
little
exactly
bit
what happened. I rang and they told me about the other one around the corner. So they were brilliant, you know, and they were able to unlock it and everything was great. Yeah.
It's lovely. Okay, we'll finish on top tips for anyone thinking of switching to an EV. Go, Conor.
Just do your research, like anything, like you're buying a car, and try and get do you know what, I think you could just go for the test drive. That's the best thing. An extended one if you can get it.
So from my perspective, there is the real world and what you're being told by a salesman on a range of an EV. So we always recommend evdatabase.org. It has everything. It has the real world information. So that's the first step, is know what it is. I always then say, buy the car you like rather than the one that you think might be better suited in some ways, because as things are progressing now to where things stand, it's getting much better with the charging network. That smaller battery might be better suitable to you in what it is now. It might require a little bit more planning at this point in time, but it's going to get much easier as things come along. But yeah, real world range to what is being sold, that's always been not correlating between petrol and diesel and real world side of things as well. EVs are slightly disproportional as we have a focus on it. But I would say EV database, real world information that's in there, talking to people that have the EVs, getting their information. And then from there, there's the simple one we were already asked today was, how do I know where every charge point is? So again, apps come into the thing, but PlugShare is open source. Everything that's in the country or worldwide is on a single app. It'll tell you where it is, it'll give you information as what's there. So that's the other one I would say, is just to have that one. It gives you everything that's required.
I would say understand what your own driving is and what your driving style, the number of trips you take. Big one is to look at frequent trips you take. So for example, frequently I would go down to the Midlands. When I was looking at my last EV, I looked for an EV that could go there and back in winter, you know, without stopping to charge. And then if I had to charge, I would. And I did that on an app, a Better Route Planner, where you can put in the car that you have or the car that you're going to buy. You can put in where you're starting from, so your house, your relative's house, and it will plot and it will tell you, you know, how much percentage it will take, and if you need to charge, where you can stop to charge, so you can buy the right tool for the job. Again, that takes away a lot of that kind of anxiety, because you know that it will do that trip there and back.
I actually saw a car from Germany charging beside me once, and I was like, I wonder how many charging stations they had to go through to get here. Anyway, and if you're thinking of getting an electric car, Nevo.ie is the only dedicated electric vehicle platform here in Ireland, so get in touch with them, they know everything, they'll be able to advise you. It's a great spot.
Does Derek come on the text for everybody that signs up? Or is it just special people? Because I don't get that one, Derek. Just
You can text Derek if your car goes down to zero. Well, I'd love to know what happens. Can we all give a round of applause to our wonderful gentlemen? Thank you so much, guys. And there will be more chats all here throughout the day. I'll be back a bit later. I'm going to welcome Derek back on stage.